السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته أيها الإخوة والأخوات. Welcome back, brothers and sisters, to our final class in the Tuhfat al-Atfaal course. So inshallah today we have a very short class covering just the last section of the poem. And it's a very short section, and it's just clarifying one of the last rules we had taken. So at the end of the last class, the previous week, we had discussed the rules of med, and we had looked at 4 specific types of med. We had looked at med wajib, med jaiz, which had different parts, and then finally we had looked at al-med al-lazim. And we said that the definition of al-med al-lazim, according to Sheikh Jamzuri in the poem, where he says, ولازم إن السكون أصلا وصلا ووقفا بعد مد طولا. The lazim is when I have an original sukun that appears after the letter of med. And this will cause the letter of med to be elongated for 6 harakat. And we said that this sukun that appears after the letter of med, it can either be by itself a plain sukun on the letter, or it can be part of a shadda letter. Yani it's part of a letter that is mushaddad. Because we said that every letter that is mushaddad, has shadda, is actually 2 letters, the first of which has sukun that are combined into 1 letter. So inshallah we will now start the last portion of the poem, where the Shaykh goes into greater detail about what mad lazim is. So this section is titled Aqsamul Mad al-Lazim, the divisions or the parts of al-Mad al-Lazim. So in verse number 48, the Shaykh starts off by saying, Aqsamu lazimin ladayhim arba'ah, wa tilka kilmiyun wa harfiyun ma'ah. The first verse says, the division or the amount of parts we're going to break mad lazim into, according to the Qurra, yani ladayhim, according to them, is arba'ah, 4 divisions. The first way we're going to break mad lazim is into 2 main categories, where we have wa tilka kilmiyun wa harfiyun ma'ah. The first division we're going to call kilmi or kalimi, and the second one we're going to call harfi, and I'll explain more why we call them these in a little bit. Then he says in verse 49, Kilahuma mukhaffafun muthaqqalu fahadhihi arba'atun tufassalu. Both divisions, kilahuma, the kalimi and the harfi, will then further be divided into mukhaffaf, which is light or no shadda, and muthaqqal, which is heavy or with shadda. So kalimi will be divided into mukhaffaf and muthaqqal, and harfi will also be divided into mukhaffaf and muthaqqal. So in that sense, we have arba'a, فَهَذِهِ أَرْبَعَةٌ تُفَصَّلُ. So these are 4 sections that we have ended up with. So let's go over this again according to what the Shaykh just said in the verses. Again, we said when lazim is elongated for 6 harakat. And the first section we're going to have is called al-kalimi, al-mad, al-lazim, al-kalimi. And the reason why it's called kalimi is because it pertains to mad that is taking place in words, in regular words, like ad-dallin or as-sakha, and so on. And the second division is called harfi, because this type of mad is only taking place in a selection or in a few of the 14 broken letters that appear at the beginning of surahs, the 14 huruf al-muqatta'a, the broken letters, such as kaf, ha, ya, ayn, sad, or alif, lam, mim. And we'll go into more detail with these just now. So harfi is only referring to these letters that show up at the beginning of surahs, and not all of them, but only a portion of them more specifically. And then we said each of these categories, both kalimi and harfi, will be further subdivided into mukhaffaf and muthaqqal, light, which means no shadda, and muthaqqal, which is heavy, which means with shadda. So here again, just to understand, when the Shaykh says there are 4 divisions of mad lazim, we have lazim kalimi mukhaffaf, lazim kalimi muthaqqal, lazim harfi mukhaffaf, and lazim harfi muthaqqal. So 4 divisions in total. Now the Shaykh in the next verse will go on to give a bit more explanation for each type. So first he begins by explaining what mad lazim kalimi is. So he says, فَإِن بِكِلْمَةٍ سُكُونٌ اجْتَمَعَ مَعْ حَرْفِ مَدٍ فَهُوَ كِلْمِيٌّ وَقَعَ. So he says, if a sukoon is joined with a letter of mad, if in one word, فَإِن بِكِلْمَةٍ, if in one word a sukoon is joined with a letter of mad, meaning if the sukoon appears after the letter of mad. I have a letter of mad and the letter immediately after it has a sukoon on it. Call this فَهْوَ كِلْمِيٌّ وَقَعَ. This is mad lazim kalimi, right? So let's look at this in more detail. This official definition is whenever I have a letter of mad that is followed by a sukoon in one composite word. Muthaqqal refers to when the letter after the letter of mad has a shadda on it. So here I have the word al-Dallin. So I have my letter of mad, al-Da, the alif here, and then right after it is a lam with shadda. So I stretch the alif for 6 harakat, al-Dallin. And then mukhaffaf refers to when the letter after the mad only has a sukoon, but it's not a sukoon that's part of a letter that has shadda. And the only example of this in the Quran for the qira'ah of Asim, another qira'ah as well, is in the word al-ana in Surah Yunus, which appears twice in Surah Yunus. The word al-ana. This is the only example of mad lazim kalimi mukhaffaf that you will find in our qira'ah. So here are some examples again of mad lazim kalimi. As-sakha, this will be muthaqqal, mad lazim kalimi muthaqqal. Ad-dallin, same thing as as-sakha. Atuhajjuni. Here I have 2 mad in the same word. I have the alif, after it is dream with shadda. Then I have the the waw, and after it is a noon with shadda. So both of these I stretch for 6 harakat. And all these 3, sakha, dallin, atuhajjuni, are all mad lazim kalimi muthaqqal. And then the last example again is the word al-ana, where it's just plain sukoon without shadda. And again, we said this is the only example of mad lazim kalimi mukhaffaf in our qira'ah. We'll also look at 2 examples here of mad lazim kalimi mukhaffaf outside of Asim. So for example, in the recitation of Qalun, he reads this ayah 164 in this numbering. قل إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين. So the other qurra, they put fatha on the ya, and they say ومحياي. So there's no reason for mad. There's no sukoon and there's no hamza after the letter of mad. But when Qalun is reading, he does have a sukoon. He does iskanul ya. He puts a sukoon on top. So what happens? I have sukoon and there's a letter of mad before it. So I have to stretch this mad for 6 harakat. Wa mahyai wa mamatiya lillahi rabbil alameen. Right, so it became mad lazim kalimi mukhaffaf. Here's another example from the qira'ah of Abu Ja'far al-Madani. So he says, إِنَّ عِدَّةَ الشُّهُورِ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ 12 شهرا 12 شهرا. So the other qurra, they read with fatha on the ayn. إثنا عشر. So there's no mad. But in Abu Ja'far's recitation, he puts a sukoon on top of the ayn. So I have sukoon before it is a letter of mad. I have to stretch the letter of mad for 6 harakat. إثنا عشر شهرا. So that covers mad lazim al-kalimi, mad lazim that occurs in words. So now we're going to go on to the next type, which is the mad lazim that occurs in the beginning of the letters that appear in the letters that appear at the beginning of surahs. So in this verse, the Shaykh says in verse number 51, أو في ثلاثي الحروف وجدا والمد وسطاه فحرفي بادا. So what is mad lazim harfi is if I have a letter that is spelled with 3 letters. If I take the letter and I spell it out, if I take the letter kaf, for example, and I spell it, kaf alif fa, it's spelled with 3 letters. And in the middle, wal maddu wasṭahu, the middle letter is a letter of mad. So if I say kaf, that's kaf alif fa, the middle letter is alif with mad. If I say noon, noon, wow, noon, the middle letter is wow, right? Wow al-maddiyah. If I say mim, mim, ya, mim, the ya in the middle of the word is a ya maddiyah. This type of mad is called harfi, right? Harfiyun, al-mad al-lazim al-harfi. So here's a further clarification. This section of mad lazim is referring to the letters of mad that exist within only 8 of the 14 separated letters, as we'll discuss further. So the total number of separated letters that appear at the beginning of surahs in the Quran are 14, but mad only applies to 8 of them. These 8 letters are spelled with 3 letters, meaning if I take them and I spell them out, I'll find that they're all spelled with 3 letters. And the second letter, meaning the middle letter, is a letter of mad. So if I look at the letter kaf, right? Kaf, alif, and then fa with sukoon. If I look at the letter mim, mim, ya in the middle, and sukoon on the mim at the end. Noon, wow in the middle, sukoon on the noon at the end, right? Because these are letters of mad and then sukoon after, as the definition of mad lazim says, I have to stretch the letter of mad in the middle of the word. And just like kalimi, we can break al-mad al-lazim al-harfi again into muthaqqal. We can break al-mad al-lazim al-harfi into muthaqqal and mukhaffaf. Muthaqqal is when idgham will occur between 2 letters. If I have, for example, ta, sin, meme, like in the beginning of Surah Ash-Shu'ara, what's going to happen to the sin and the meme? They're going to get merged into ta, sin, meme, right? The rules of noon sakina come back again here. I merge the noon into the meme. So sin, meme becomes sin, meme, right? I read it as ta, si, or ta, si, meme. Right? This is muthaqqal because merging is happening, idgham is taking place. The second type is mukhaffaf, where no idgham is happening. So in this case, I'm just reading the letters and nothing is being merged together. Like if I have ha mim, I just say ha mim. Nothing is being merged into anything else. And then in the last section of the poem, the Shaykh also gives more details about what these 14 separated letters are. So the 14 separated letters, al-huruf al-muqatta'a, here are all the places they appear in the Quran: alif lam mim sad, alif lam ra, alif lam mim ra, kaf ya ain sad, till the end, this entire list here. These are letters that appear at the beginning of surahs, and only at the beginning of surahs, the first ayah or the first 2 ayahs of a surah. They don't appear anywhere in the middle of a surah. And yani the consensus, or one of the major opinions, that Allah Azza wa Jal is taking an oath by these letters, and their exact meaning is unknown. But the focus here is, why do we stretch them? Why are we doing mad on some of these letters, but not all of them. So the letters in red here are the ones that we stretch. The letters in blue we don't stretch, and we'll see why. The green means no med, and the purple for ayn means there's two options available, and we'll go through them now. So the Shaykh defines further what lazim harfi is. So he says, وَاللَّازِمُ الْحَرْفِيُّ أَوَّلَ السُّوَرِ. Mad lazim harfi appears at the beginning of surahs, wujuduhu, that's where it exists. وَفِي ثَمَانٍ حَاصَرٍ. And it is confined to just 8 of these 14 letters. Total of 14 letters appear in the beginning of surahs, only 8 of them the mad applies to. يَجْمَعُهَا حُرُوفُ كَمْ عَسَلْ نَقَص. You can gather these 8 letters together in the mnemonic كم عسل نقص. كم عسل نقص. وعين ذو وجهين والطول أخص. And the letter عين here in عين عسل has 2 options, 2 ways to read it, and stretching it long is the preferred way to do it. So these 8 letters are Sin, Nun, Qaf, Sad, Lam, Kaf, Mim, Ayn. And as we said before, if we take each of these letters and we spell them out, we will see that the middle letter is a letter of med. And so because when I pronounce them, when I'm reading them at the beginning of a surah, the result is that there is a sukoon on the last letter. Like if I say Qaf, there's a sukoon on the fa at the end. If I say noon, there's a sukoon on the noon at the end, right? They fall under the definition of med lazim, which is a sukoon that appears after the letter of med and is mandatory. It doesn't disappear because of joining or stopping. And again, these 8 letters are put together in the mnemonic kam asal naqas. And there's different ways to organize these letters as well. But then let's clarify what the Shaykh means when he says that ayn has 2 options. The reason why we specify ayn is because if I spell it out, I'll notice that it's a letter of lean. It's not a letter of med, right? If I spell out the letter ayn, ya, noon, it's not ya with sukoon and kasra before it, ayn, it's ayn, like bayt, for example, right? And we said the letters of lean are wa with sukoon, fatha before it, and ya with sukoon and fatha before it, right? So because of this, because it's not a pure letter of med, the Qurra have said you can either do 6 haraka, like its sisters in the same collection of words, like in kaf, or collection of letters, kaf, ha, ya, ayn, sad, or stretch it for just 4 haraka, because it's not the same. It's not from the same type as its sisters are. And then outside the root of Shatibiyya, which is considered the primary root for most people whenever they're reading the Quran, there is also the option of reciting the ayn with just 2 haraka. So you don't even give med to the ayn. So you would just say, for example, Hamim, Ayn, Sin, Qaf. I would just stretch the ayn for 2 haraka. And again, the reason for this is because the ayn, if I spell it out, it's not a pure letter of med, it's just a letter of lean. So again, here are the examples. If I look at the first one, alif, lam, mim, and this is muthaqqal because I'm merging the mim from the lam with the mim from the mim in the next letter. Same thing, alif, lam, mim, sad, right? All these red letters, we'll notice that they're actually spelled with 3 letters, and the middle letter is a letter of mad. But as the Shaykh mentioned, not all of these letters, not all of these 14 letters have mad applicable to them. So he says in verse 55, وَمَا سِوَى الْحَرْفِ الثُّلَاثِي لَا أَلِفْ فَمَدُّهُ مَدًّا طَبِيعِيًّا أُولِفْ. And everything that is not spelled with 3 letters, all of the letters that are not spelled with 3 letters, And also we exclude alif, la alif, يعني غير alif. Also take alif out of the mix. Then its mad, فمده مدا طبيعيا ألف. Its mad is natural. We're only going to stretch them for 2 haraka and nothing more. And he says, وَذَاكَ أَيْضًا فِي فَوَاتِحِ السُّوَرِ. And these letters are also found at the beginning of surahs, في لفظ, and they are put together in the expression حَيٍّ طَاهِرٍ قَادٍ حَاصَرٍ. They are confined in this expression حَيٍّ طَاهِرٍ حَا يَا طَا أَلِف هَا رَا. So these remaining 6 letters of the huruf al-muqatta'a, so 8 of them went to the mad, and the remaining 6 do not have mad. So 5 of these, the ha, the ya, the ta, the ha, the ra, they are spelled with just 2 letters, as we'll see. And the letter alif, if we spell it out, we see there is no letter of mad inside it. If I spell alif, hamza with fatha, lif, lam with kasra, then fa with sukun, there's no mad in there. So there's nothing I can even stretch to begin with. Right? And so because these are just spelled with 2 letters, as we'll see, there isn't any sukun to cause the mad, to cause me to stretch them beyond their natural length. And again, we put them together in the mnemonic Hayyun Tahir. So if we take each of these letters, the ha, the ya, the ta, the ha, the ra, and we spell them, we get ha, ya, ta, ha, ra. See, there's an alif, but there's nothing after the alif that would cause the letter to be stretched beyond its natural length. Because we said mad is either caused by hamza or by sukun. So here are some examples again of how we apply this now. So if I have the letters alif, lam, mim, the alif doesn't get stretched, it just gets pronounced as alif. The lam does get stretched, lam, and then the mim, and I merge the 2 memes together, lam, mim, right? If I look at the word kaf, ha, ya, ayn, sad, what happens? The first letter, kaf, gets stretched because it has a letter of mad in its middle. Kaf. Second letter, is there mad? No, because there's no sukun after it, so it just gets natural. Ha. Same thing for ya. Ya. The ayn has 2 options. Let's say we read with the 6 haraka option. Ayn. And then the last letter, sad, also has a sukun after it. Sad. The result is kaf, ha, ya, ayn, sad. Right? And the last example, noon, if it's just a single letter, I will stretch it again. Noon. Right? طيب, inshallah. So here is just a chart that breaks down what each letter has in terms of mad. We said alif will only be stretched for 0 haraka because there is no letter of mad inside of it. The letters hayyun tahur, because we took the alif out, will only ever be stretched for 2 haraka because they are natural mad. There's nothing causing them to be stretched beyond their natural limit. The letters of sanaqussu lakum, because we took the ayn out of kama sanaqas, will always be stretched for 6 haraka as part of mad lazim harfi, because the sukun is always there. And then the ayn, we said we have the option of 4 or 6 haraka because it's just a letter of leen, not a letter of mad and leen. So to differentiate it, I have these 2 options when reading. And then the final verse of the poem in terms of rules, the Shaykh says, وَيَجْمَعُ الْفَوَاتِحَ الْأَرْبَعَ عَشَرَ صِلْهُ سُحَيْرًا مَنْ قَاطَعْكَ ذَا اشْتَهَرَ. And these 14 letters that appear at the beginning of surahs, they can be gathered together, or they are gathered together with this expression, صِلْهُ سُحَيْرًا مَنْ قَاطَعْكَ. So the sad, lam, ha, sin, ha, ya, ra, alif, if we switch the tanween to the alif, mid iwad, mim, noon, qaf, ta, ayn, kaf. Right, these are the 14 letters that appear at the beginning of surahs, and there are other expressions used like nas hakim qati' lahu sir, for example, is another way to remember these 14 letters. And he says dashtahar, this is the famous or popular expression that the ulama of tajweed use to remember these 14 letters at the beginning of the surahs. So again, just to recap mad lazim, we say the first category is mad lazim kalimi, which pertains to words. We have the mukhaffaf type, where it's just a sukoon after the letter of mad. Only one example of in the qira of Asim in al-ana, no idgham is happening. We have the muthaqqal, such as as-sakha, because this letter after it has shadda, and therefore the kha has idgham going on inside of it. Then we said we had mad lazim harfi, which is mukhaffaf with no idgham. If I just say hamim, nothing is being merged. And then we have the muthaqqal, which is tasim mim, where I merge the sin into the mim. And then we will now take the final 4 verses of the poem, the Khatima, where the Shaykh ends off, where he says, وَتَمَّ ذَا النَّظْمُ بِحَمْدِ اللَّهِ عَلَى تَمَامِهِ بِلَا تَنَاهِي. And he says the poem has finally been completed with the praise to Allah Azza wa Jal for its completion without end, yani without end to his praise subhanahu wa ta'ala. ثم الصلاة والسلام أبدا على ختام الأنبياء أحمدا. And salah and salam forever are sent on the seal of the prophets Ahmada, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. والآل والصحب وكل تابعي وكل قارئ وكل سامعي. And also salah and salam are sent on the al, the family, and the sahab, the companions, وكل تابعي, and everyone who follows after them, وكل قارئ, and everyone who recites, يعني either the Quran or the person who reads this poem, وكل سامعي, and everyone who listens, يعني everyone who listens to the Quran, or also everyone who يعني listens to the recitation of this poem. And then the Shaykh ends off with a verse which is common in many poems, where he uses a code to tell you how many verses are in the poem and what date it was written. So he says, أبياته ند بدا لي ذنها. أبياته, the number of verses in this poem are naddun bada. And this is part of the science of al-jummal, where you take each letter in the abjad alphabet as part of al-hisab al-jummal, and you assign a number to it. And when you add up these letters as numbers, you get the final result. So he says, naddun bada. If we find the corresponding numbers to this phrase, we end up with 61, right? So he says the number of verses of this poem are 61. لِذِنُّهَا, to those who have knowledge or intellect. تَارِيخُهُ, the date of my composition or the date of composing this poem is بُشْرَى لِمَن يُتْقِنُهَا, those who perfect it. And again, if we take each of the letters in this expression, بُشْرَى لِمَن يُتْقِنُهَا, the final number we get is the year 1198 Hijri. And this was the year the Shaykh completed his poem. So just about 240 years ago, approximately. Rahimahullah, may Allah have mercy on the Shaykh and reward him for his efforts. And as the Muhaqq says, تمت منظومة تحفة الأطفال ولله الحمد أولا وآخرا.